Hello, just thought I would record the time. I don't quite have time to actually do a full video because I actually have something I want to talk about today. But it's 10:18, well, just turned 10:19, and I'm at my desk ready to work. Hello, I am back in my lunch break, but I'm fasting, so there's no lunch break. But at least I have some time where I can talk about the thing I wanted to talk about, which was this idea, which I think I have already believed in my life because I think about this all of the time. Because if you don't know, one of my fascinations is in organizational design, systems, and how organizations are structured. And one thing that has come up recently that I've been thinking about around this idea is the fact that the output of an organization is actually reflective of the organization's design itself. So this is an idea that a designer who I'm going to look up now, Melvin E. Conway, seemed to have coined, which is that organizations which use design systems are constrained to produce designs which are copies of the communication structures within these organizations. And I think this is extremely true. Recently, in the last couple of months, I have to interact with other organizational structures other than the one that we have designed or I have designed at Answer in Progress myself. And we're having this conflict in terms of working styles, which I think is reflective of the systems and structures that we are using to organize people and communication flow in the organizations, in our respective organizations. And so when we're communicating, there is a way that our culture is actually born out of the design of the organization and the culture of the organization. So there are a couple of ways that I think this is interesting. And one is, if we think about the design of an organization to then reflect the output, we can say that the system is there's this other concept in systems thinking, which is that the purpose of a system is what it does. If you create a machine that is supposed to make red paint and it ends up making yellow paint, the machine is that you've just made a yellow paint machine, not a red paint machine that's malfunctioning. So this idea is basically that the system that you have and the system you intended to create might be slightly different. And it's your job to understand if that's true. But anyway, these two concepts I think are interesting to try and piece together. And the reason is, I think that there is a lower layer to this that I think is important to think about. So if we can understand that the output and the design systems, I think all creative output is what organizations do. Even organizations you might find a little boring have a creative output in the sense that they create something of value to someone. So if the organization and communication flows are not designed correctly, then even if you set a new destination for the organization to go to, it's actually going to go there extremely inefficiently, or actually go to a place that is close to the destination you want to go to, but not exactly. And I think there is a layer below this that is really important, which is the tools that you choose to use. And the reason I say that is because if the design of the organization is predicated upon the ways that communication is done, I think that we can think of communication not as just people talking to each other, but how information interacts within an organization. And the way that information is carried, managed, and stored in an organization is the tools that you decide to use. And I think that this is a really, really important part of organizational design that I think is sometimes overlooked, because I think that people come with their own preferences for what tools they like. You know, someone might like Microsoft Teams, someone else might like Slack or whatever. Someone might like email. And I think that all of these things have cognitive trade-off and also organizational trade-off in terms of the way that these tools are designed and how they shape the behavior of people and also the storage of information. So this is something that I think is extremely important in the abstract, because I think there is a real tendency to overlook this layer of organizational design. and really focus on, let's get some great people in there. Let's train those people up. Let's make sure that they're motivated. And all of these things are pretty well covered. But I actually think that the tools that people use are only thought about in terms of whether or not they are easy to use, easy for other people to understand, and if everyone's happy with the tools. I think that those three things are somewhat misleading because people can come from different organizations where they had a different culture and also different goals for the organization. And as a result, they used different tools that they are then trained in. And if they are trained in those tools, they are always going to bias towards those tools as ways to store information and the flow of information. So as a result, what happens is that the bad habits from other organizations can flow into yours if you compromise on tools and sort of defer to individual members of the organization in order to run the tool stack that you run. So this is all very abstract, and you're sort of getting the organizational design part of me rather than just the self-reflective, what's wrong with me kind of part of me. But I think this is something that anyone can really implement in their life, because I actually think that the smallest organization, the smallest unit of organization is yourself. And the tools that you use and the way that you store information can be extremely reflective of the behavior that you then ladder up to, and then the output and the systems that you ladder up to. And some of those tools can be software. So where do you store your tasks? Where do you store your information in terms of calendars and all this other stuff and emails and blah, 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 right? So that's like one type of or layer of tools. But the other thing is hardware. So I don't necessarily just mean my laptop. I also mean my keyboard, my mouse, maybe the type of camera I decide to use, and the type of pen I use, paper, post-it notes, everything, all of the stuff that you use in terms of tools. But then you can abstract it more than that. You can be the space that you're in. And I think all of these things actually affect how information is manipulated, stored, and communicated. Because if you are the individual unit in the organization, then your mood will affect the way that you are able to think. And that can be affected by the sunlight and the space that you're in, blah, 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 right? So I just wanted to demonstrate that this concept can be abstracted to be almost everything. But the reason I think this is important is because the way that you communicate, if you accept that the way that you communicate is immediately, and when I say communicate, I mean the way that you manipulate and interact with information is inherently going to ultimately affect how you do stuff. And that is going to then affect the outcomes of the organization or yourself. Then you can really understand that, like, paying attention to how you interact with information is somewhat the most important thing to continually scrutinize when it comes to the direction of your life. And so all of that to say, there is a way in which I am learning in the last few months that maybe I have not actually really seriously interrogated all of the ways that I manipulate and interact with information in my life. And those are important things that happen, I think, very infrequently, whether it's when you move job, or once a year at New Year's when people reevaluate, different apps and stuff and productivity things, or when they move house and they decide, I'm going to set this up in a different way or whatever. But most of the time, and I'm guilty of this, I've not really paid attention to the physical environment that I've been in for the last year. But I think it is extremely important for that reason. I think that design, the guy Conway, he talks about design systems. So that's just designers. If designers are siloed amongst an organization, then they create more disparate designs. And if all of the functions of an organization are more unified in terms of their philosophical vision, then they create more unified design. And I got this from a video that I was watching about why liquid glass is potentially not great. And maybe I'll link that in the description. But I think the idea is actually more interesting abstracted, which is that really paying attention to the information flows in your life is one of the most critical things that you can do, because it shapes and has the highest ripple effect to all areas of your life, whether or not you are a single person organization yourself, or whether or not you have control over a team, or if you're running a company or an organization. I think that one example of this could be whether or not you store information in Notion and how that information is structured in Notion, or if you store everything in random Notes app conversations on iMessage and Notes app and whatever. So like all of these things I think are important to scrutinize, and I actually do think they have downstream effects on how the team or organization ends up interacting. So those are some rough thoughts that I had that I thought I would just sketch out and throw up today.